I lied to the only woman who made me believe in love again, and I did it with rain on my face and trash under my nails. Ever seen a man pull bottles from a gutter by day and sign 7 figures by night? If it were you, would you forgive him? My name is Emma Okafor, and for a long time Lagos felt like a city I could fold into my pocket. Glass towers that caught the sun, cars that purred at a touch, rooms where a small nod from me changed the temperature. People greeted me with champagne before they asked my name. They measured my worth in the shine on my watch. And I learned to smile like none of it stung, you know what I mean. On paper, I had it all. The hilltop mansion, the private elevator, the office with windows that framed the whole city like a trophy. Yet every night, I stared out at a billion lights and heard a quiet that money could not bribe. Lovers came easy and left easier, and the question that kept me up was simple and ugly. If I lost it all tomorrow, who would stay? So I disappeared from my own life. Not forever, not dramatically, just enough to listen to the world without my name in the way. I moved a manager into the mansion like a museum guard shaved carelessly so the mirror would not recognize me. Traded Italian leather for shoes with holes slipped into a shirt that had outlived 3 good owners and picked a name that meant nothing in a boardroom. Chinedu. One choice and suddenly the air felt different, cleaner, like someone had opened a window I didn't know was painted shut. Scary, yes, yet honest in a way my life had not been for years. The first morning as Chinedu, I walked into the market and let it teach me its language. Heat that rose from tin roofs, the smell of pepper and diesel voices, haggling like percussion puddles that remembered last night's storm. I kept my head down the way people do when life has not been gentle, and I fell in step with the men who sort what the city throws away. Plastic from paper value, from garbage dignity, from whatever you can carry. There is a math to survival. This many bottles make that many naira if you weigh them right. That vendor will shave your count, unless you say the numbers out loud, break down the cardboard, or you are just moving air. No one clapped for me there. No one offered a seat or a title, and the only nods I earned came from people who had been at it since before dawn. Then she dropped her beads. That's how my life changed. Not with a swell of music or a slow motion moment, just clay beads rolling across wet, concrete, tiny planets escaping their orbit. I knelt to help because that is what you do when your hands are already dirty, and when I looked up, I met a warm that didn't ask for credentials. Amara. Dark braids pulled back eyes that had done the heavy lifting, hands coaxing beauty out of clay, a voice with no hunger for status. She sold jewelry, she molded herself beads with fingerprints on purpose, the kind that carry the maker's breath. And she talked about a small school she wanted for girls who believed their future was only what the day handed them. No fishing for attention, no glitter, just a plan built from early mornings and stubborn hope. I told her my name was Chinedu, and that I was picking trash to make ends meet. And she didn't pity me, didn't press me, she simply shifted the basket and said, "If you're here, help me count." So we counted. 1 color, 2 color rough edges in one bowl, polished ones in another. And the market moved around us loud and alive while our small corner felt calm. I left that night not for the penthouse, but for a room with old wood and a thin mattress, and the quiet I carried to sleep felt like peace, not emptiness. That's rare. Days found their rhythm. Mornings with the scavenger's straps cutting lines into my shoulders, afternoons at her stall, where the sun baked the ground, and she laughed like she'd been here before and knew it would pass. I learned the price of a bottle by the gram. The grace of a smile that isn't purchased, the dignity of people who never got a receipt for it. My back argued at first, my palms stiffened, my pride sat down and listened. If it were you, would you keep the mask on and soak up the kindness, or take it off and risk watching it all fall apart? Here's the thing about lies. They age like milk. Mine started to sour at the edges where real feelings were trying to grow. I stood a little too straight. I chose words that didn't match the world I claimed. Amara tilted her head sometimes like she'd noticed something, but decided not to wound me with it. She trusted my presence, she liked my help, and the longer I waited, the more my silence turned into a kind of theft. Do you think that's fair? One evening, the sky split open. Rain hammered the roof so hard, the air tasted like metal. The market flooded to the ankles, umbrellas bloomed like dark flowers. She moved fast, packing beads covering trays, and I held an umbrella badly while the truth rattled its cage inside me. I said her name and told her I needed to say something. She looked at me the way a person does when they know the next sentence will change the chapter. I breathed once and said it. I'm not who you think. I'm Emma Okafor. The word billionaire doesn't land gently in a storm. It hits like a wrong note, loud, hard, out of place. She did not yell. She did not make a show. She asked the only question that mattered. Why? Because money turned every date into an audition and every compliment into a receipt, I said, and then it turned me into a liar. When I went hunting for something true, I wanted to know if love could see me without the shine. I expected grace. That's how the rich keep their illusions polished. And what I got was the simple sincerity I claimed to be seeking. She said she needed time, the kind that isn't bought with flowers or grand gestures, the kind that requires silence and nerve. Then she walked away into the rain like someone who knows where home is, even when it hurts to get there. The next days stretched. I kept showing up because leaving would have turned the whole thing into a stunt, and I had finally run out of appetite for stunts. A driver slowed and stared too long, a woman whispered and pointed, and then a former associate appeared, shoes still clean tone, full of the smug nobody misses. He said my name like it was a charge, and told me I was out of my mind, reminded me there were shareholders to impress, warned me that a brand is a fragile thing. I told him a brand is a mask with a logo, and a mask is still a mask. He left with a headshake, and I got back to work, hands in the bin, heart strangely steady. Amara returned at dusk. She didn't make it easy or cruel, she kept it true. You want to prove who you are, she said. Then live the life you borrowed. Not for a photo, not for a week, for long enough that your bones understand it. That's the kind of sentence that cleans out a person. I said yes, not because a yes would buy forgiveness, but because the man I wanted to be couldn't survive inside the man I had been. So I lived it. Dawn to dark, sorting, lifting, counting out loud so no one cut the numbers short, bargaining with men who had no time for self-pity, sharing fruit with kids whose laughter came free, carrying crates for an elder whose back made a small sound that made me wince standing guard at a neighbor's stall when the rain came sideways. Slowly, the market adjusted to me, or maybe I adjusted to it. Nods became greetings. Greetings became trust. Trust became tasks handed to me without a speech. That, more than any balance sheet, felt like proof. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. One evening, the air cooled and Lagos smelled like rain without the rain, and Amara walked over with a look that made me pay attention. She told me I'd come far, that my actions had started to outrun my words, that I'd earned respect where suspicion had lived. I almost asked the dumb question, are we fine now? But the world is funny about timing. The twist arrived right then, quiet, heavy, unavoidable. She had a secret, too, not small, not cute, the kind that flips a story. Her family, she said, was wealthy. Old money corporate halls, a father who knew boardrooms better than birthdays. She hadn't been pretending to be poor for sport. She had been running from a last name that entered every room before she did, testing whether the work of her hands could build a life that didn't require an apology. Yeah, that happened. I stood there with my mouth half open, not angry, not even surprised, just humbled that I had been so busy analyzing my own disguise, I'd never considered hers might be armor too. If it were you, would her secret make it easier to forgive mine, or would it make the whole thing feel like a stage? I didn't feel tricked. I felt understood. Two people, two masks, two good reasons. Not good enough reasons to keep lying, but real enough that you could trace the fear in them. She cried softly, the kind of tears that arrive because holding them back would be a lie, and I told her the thing I should have said on the first day I won't hide again. Not from you, not from the work this will ask of us. She nodded, not a promise, just a beginning. Life didn't flip a switch to happily ever after. It gave us a new routine that felt like honesty. I stayed in the market not as punishment, but as a place I'd come to belong, still sorting, still learning, still catching myself when old reflexes tried to cut corners. She invited me into the quieter parts of her life, a home with a window that drew a square of light on the floor in the afternoon, a pot that simmered with something that smelled like home, a notebook with sketches for a classroom where girls could sit at tables sized for their elbows and hang their first finished pieces at eye level. We talked about work and impact, not headlines, and I learned to measure cost in hours and patience, not just money. I went back to my companies with a spine that felt different. Not to deliver a sermon, please spare me that, but to change terms in places where the math had been cruel. We simplified perks, raised wages where the numbers had lied, wrote contracts that were kinder than they needed to be, and yes, people pushed back because generosity looks like weakness to the weak. I let results talk. Productivity up because dignity was up, turnover down because respect is sticky. You know what I mean. And at dusk, when the city softened, I went back to the market to lift what needed lifting, not because my presence was noble, but because my absence would have been loud. There was one conversation we couldn't avoid. Amara's father invited me to an office that looked like money had good taste. He told me he'd heard about my little performance in the market, called it adorable. In a tone that wasn't said his daughter needed stability, not experiments, then offered me a partnership proposal that looked generous and felt like a leash. Old me would have smiled and signed, new me kept it short. The only partnership I'm chasing is the one where your daughter's school belongs to her and the girls it serves, I said. If you want and great, show up with your sleeves rolled, not your name engraved on the door. He said I would regret that tone. I told him I already regret the years I used a different one. Pattern interrupt. He laughed, and it sounded like fear with cologne. We announced the school not with a press release, but a block party chalk for drawing dreams on concrete. A sign-up table where anyone could claim a Saturday to teach or hammer or paint a jar, where Naira met nails because both were needed. Music made the work easier. Carpenters told stories with their tools. Girls who had watched from the edge stepped in and tried a bead for the first time. Amara gave a thank you that wasn't a speech we start Monday, and I learned something true. The best beginnings are short. A reporter asked if I was done pretending to be poor. I told her I was done pretending anything, that I would likely be inconsistent for a while, and that honesty often looks messy from a distance. She frowned, because that answer doesn't fit into a headline. That's fine. Here's the part that might make you argue, and maybe you should. Was I wrong to hide my wealth to test love? Was Amara wrong to hide hers to escape the noise of her last name? Does intention matter more than method? Or does the ability to step in and out of poverty at will make any experiment immoral by default? Do you think that's fair? If it were you, where would you draw the line between searching for something real and playing with other people's realities? I can tell you what I learned. Not a moral, just a map. Love that can be bought isn't love, and love that requires a test isn't ready. Trust grows where truth keeps showing up, especially on the days it costs you comfort. Service recalibrates you. Not the photo of service, the repetition. Community does not clap for you, it watches you, and if you keep showing up, it holds you up when you slip. The person you are when no one is applauding is the person the right one will recognize. Today, my life has two addresses: the office where we sign checks that keep the school open, and the market where I still carry a crate when the rain shows up early. Amara and I fight sometimes, and that matters because we fight differently now. No masks, no scripts, just two people learning how to be brave without acting brave. Some nights the power cuts, and the city hums like a sleeping animal, and we sit on the steps counting beats between thunder and a new idea. And I remember the first confession in the rain, and the second confession that followed it. And I feel grateful that truth shook us hard enough to wake us. So here we are. If you're still with me, thank you for listening to the messy version instead of the brochure. Tell me where you land. Is it ever okay to hide your status to test love? Does privilege make any disguise unethical, no matter the motive? Have you ever worn a mask to be seen for the part of you that felt most true? If it were you, what would you have done? Drop a comment and fight me respectfully. In there, share this with someone who needs a gentle punch of honesty, and hit subscribe if you want more stories told without the polish, because the next chapter gets written between what we believe and what we're willing to change.